To have Abhijit and Katie with us today. And if you're interested in the next hour, I think they're sharing in our college age room, community room downstairs. And if you'd like to hear a little bit more about the work that's happening there, you're welcome to go join them if you'll fit. And so that's the only deal that you may have to figure out. But glad that they're here. You know, today we are entering into our fourth week in this sermon series called Life on Mission. I'm telling you right now, this is the series that I have been looking so forward to all year long, because I have just sensed that it is this series that is going to have a huge impact on the effectiveness of our church into the future. And whether we are effective or not, whether we are making a difference or not, whether we are influencing our culture or not, is going to be dependent upon our willingness to truly embrace this life on mission that we're talking about. And as we unpacked this several weeks ago, we began talking about this mission that we have is really the Jesus mission. When Jesus came to this earth, he lived a life on mission, and it is so clear through the Gospels what that mission was. And it wasn't just his mission, it's our mission. And we have use some of Dave Ferguson's ideas here to help package in such a way that is memorable for us, the Jesus mission, where it is expressed through 3 R's. And I'm going to put it back up here on the screen, because if you're new with this, I want to catch you up to speed. We've been talking about the Jesus mission, which is seen in each of these 3 R's, which is to reach people who are far from God, and to reach outside of our social barriers, our ethnic barriers, our racial barriers, our geographical barriers, to reach people who are far from God. Then to restore God's dream for their lives in the world. To look at what is broken that needs to be healed. Jesus came to restore that which is broken. Even when you look into communities and you see poverty and you see addiction and you see hunger and you see whatever it is that's broken, God's dream is to restore, to heal that which is broken. So it is to reach those far from God. It is to restore God's dream for their lives and for the world. And then it is to reproduce that mission in others so they too can reach and restore and reproduce that mission in others. So I just want you real quick, let's just say those 3 R's together. Let's get in our head. Ready to say it together. It is to reach and restore and reproduce. That is the Jesus mission. And a couple weeks ago, we just looked at that and said, man, it seems so overwhelming. When you look at the great need of the world, you can be overwhelmed with a mission like that says we're going to reach those far from God. We're going to restore and reproduce. And so we introduced something called the Bless Strategy. If you want to read why we went with the Bless Strategy or hear about that, you can go online and listen to our sermon from week 2 of this series. But we said we want to bless people. And we're going to do that through a strategy that'll help us achieve the mission of the 3 R's. And that strategy, the BLESS strategy, is an acronym. BLESS is an acronym. And each of these letters stands for something. So if you're taking notes, so you can write these down. But B is begin with prayer. Begin with prayer. This is so overwhelming, so beyond us. We have to begin with prayer because that unleashes the power of God. Then we encourage people to listen. To listen. And then to eat. When you eat with other people, something mysterious happens. When you're eating with people where you get to share lives and share hearts together, eat together. S stands for serve. When you serve, it opens doors. And last is story, sharing your story. That's the blessed strategy. Begin with prayer. Listen, eat, serve, and story. Share your story. Now that is the strategy that accomplishes this mission. And that strategy, all it does is it opens hearts and it opens minds, it opens doors for the gospel to go out. But that strategy is not automatic. It's not just a checklist where you say, okay, BLESS, begin with prayer, listen, eat, serve, story. Okay, check, did all that. Okay, we're good to go. It's not just a checklist you go through where you can expect automatic results. And in fact, there was one guy who tried it. And I'm going to have you give your attention to the screen. You can judge for yourselves how it turned out. But here's a guy who tried the Bless strategy by checking it off his list.
Hey, my name is Alec Bramlett. We're coming to you live from Anderson's Bookshop. We're going to play a new game called Bless in a Minute or Less. And I'm the host, actually the contestant, and, the audience kind of too. So let's go inside, check it out. Okay, so we're here inside Anderson's bookshop, and I guess we got to be kind of quiet because it is a bookshop. Or is that just libraries? I'm not sure. Anyway, we're going to play the new game, Bless in a Minute or Less. And it looks like this guy right here is someone we could talk to. Hi, sir. What's your name?
Tayshawn.
Well, do you want to play Bless in a Minute or Less?
Sure.
All right, let's go play. All right, Tayshawn, here's how the game works. I'm actually the contestant. You're just going to watch. But I do need you to help. You're going to be the timekeeper because I'm going to try and bless you in a minute or less. All right? So don't let me go over 60 seconds. I have 60 seconds or less to bless you. All right? We're doing one of those new cross-stitch things, you know, where each letter stands for something. It's like, what is it, an acrostic? It's like, no, it's like an anagram, an angiogram. So I'm going to try and do each letter of the word bless in a minute or less. Ready? All right, start the time. Boom. Okay. Say something. I'm listening. I'm here for you. Okay, good. Done. Got it. All right. Look. It really does satisfy. But, here. Okay. Yeah, you can start eating it. Go ahead, eat it. Eat the whole thing. How does it taste? Is there anything else I can bring you? Okay, good. Got it. All right. Once upon a time, good night moon, the end. Done. What's my time? How'd I do? We did it! We did it! Yes! I want to thank you, Tayshawn. I want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Anderson. I want to thank the Easter Bunny.
Right. That's how you don't do it right there. When we talk about the blessed strategy, it's not just something you check off your list and say, man, we're just going to go through this boom, 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 and man, look, we've made a difference. What we're saying is that a blessed strategy opens doors and opens hearts and opens minds. And it gives you an opportunity to share Jesus with other people and to leverage your influence. So last week we talked about begin with prayer. Today what we want to talk about is the L of this. We want to talk about listen. Because one of the most effective ways you can open doors into people's lives is if we would just listen. If we're completely honest, we are terrible listeners, aren't we? Aren't we bad listeners so often? I mean, how many of you have ever had that occasion where you were talking and you just knew somebody was not listening? They're looking somewhere else. They're not tracking with you. And the only people raising their hands are wives glaring at their husbands. I'm not sure what's wrong with that, but it happens. And sometimes it's because we're too busy to listen. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've been in the middle of maybe unloading a dishwasher. I'm in the kitchen and Kim says something like, hey, Wayne, can you take the dog out? And you're like, yeah, okay, yeah. And then you keep working, and then a few seconds later, you're like, my wife just asked me to do something that I just agreed to, and I have no clue what she just said, I know there's times when my kids could probably come in and just be like, Dad, there's some stranger outside, and he's willing to take us, to Arizona if we want to go. All right, have fun, have a good time. And we're not listening. We're too busy to listen. At other times, we're just too self-absorbed to listen. We're talking, and we want people to hear what we have to say, but we're not listening to what they have to say. And we've all been a part of those conversations where the other person is saying, yeah, but they didn't really listen to what we were saying. And maybe you've heard this saying that the opposite of listening is not speaking. The opposite of listening is waiting to speak, right? Because it's in the waiting where you're trying to form what you're going to say, and you're thinking about what you're going to talk about, and you're queuing up what you want to say next. And so the art of listening will create opportunities for us to show Jesus to other people. And I just want to illustrate this today in Luke's gospel, in Luke chapter 18. If you have your Bible or your device, you can open up to that and go to Luke chapter 18. And I want to look at Jesus as this expert listener. But before we get to that, I want us to look very quickly at the disciples who just didn't seem to listen so well. You can kind of compare and contrast the disciples and Jesus and their listening skill and ability. And to this, we're going to look at Luke chapter 18 and begin in verses 31 through 34. And Jesus takes the 12. He takes the 12 aside, and here's what he tells them. He says, "We are going up to Jerusalem, and everything that is written by the prophets about the Son of Man will be fulfilled. He will be handed over to the Gentiles. They will mock him, insult him, spit on him, flog him, and kill him. And on the third day he will rise again." The disciples did not understand any of this. Its meaning was hidden from them, and they did not know what he was talking about. Now my question is, could Jesus not have been more clear? Here's what he says. We're going to Jerusalem. I'll be betrayed. The chief priests and teachers of the law will be responsible. I will be handed over to the Gentiles for a death sentence. They will be the one to carry it out. I will be mocked and insulted and flogged. Matthew's gospel on this same account will say he will even be crucified. And on the third day, I will rise again. Now I understand that the text says that this was kept hidden from them. They didn't understand its full meaning. But I also know that this is the third occasion that Jesus has clearly predicted his death. It's the third time he has said this. But they have such different expectations of the Messiah. They have such different expectations of how this is going to go and how this is going to turn out that even as you look at the other encounters of Jesus and the disciples, you just learn they're just not real good listeners. I mean, even when Jesus is talking about serving people, they're arguing about who's the greatest. I mean, these are the guys that just didn't listen real well. And that is in such contrast to Jesus, who was an expert listener. And as we continue in the text, you see Jesus' ability to listen to be so much better than the disciples. And here's how this goes. In Luke 18 and verse 35 through 43, it says, "As Jesus approached Jericho, a blind man was sitting by the roadside begging. And when he heard the crowd going by, he asked what was happening. And they told him, Jesus of Nazareth is passing by. And he called out, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. And those who led the way rebuked him and told him to be quiet. But he shouted all the more, Son of David, have mercy on me. And Jesus stopped. And he ordered that the man be brought to him. And when he came near, Jesus asked him, what do you want me to do for you? Lord, I want to see, he replied. And Jesus said to him, receive your sight. Your faith has healed you. And immediately he received his sight. And he followed Jesus, praising God. And when all the people saw it, they also praised God. Jesus is making this journey to Jerusalem, and he's not alone. The crowds are going to Jerusalem as well. They're headed for the Passover. Jericho was en route to Jerusalem. In fact, here's a map that kind of shows, I think it'll show up here, just how far Jericho is from Jerusalem, about 15 miles. Jericho it's full of palms and figs and gardens, but it also had these balsams that were used to heal the diseases of the eyes. So it is not surprising to find some blind men there. Matthew says there were 2 blind men. Luke only tells us about Bartimaeus, but it's probably because he's the one doing the talking. He's the one that's crying out. And there's something that really stands out in this story. The text says that Jesus stopped. He stopped. He calls for Bartimaeus to come to him. And then he asks him a question. And this is eye-opening for me. When Jesus says, what do you want me to do for you? Jesus already knows what he wants. He already knows his heart. He already knows his need. And yet Jesus gives him an opportunity to speak. And he listens to him. And I think we should pay attention to this. Because oftentimes we just go right into fix-it mode. We're just going to fix it, and we're going to do this. We're going to make it all better. But what people really want is to be heard. And so Jesus, before he speaks and before he acts, Jesus listens. And he listens to what he has to say. And it gives him great insight into the heart of Bartimaeus. And it just tells me we need to take note of this. We need to stop to listen to people. We need to stop to listen to people. Jesus learned a lot about Bartimaeus just by listening. He learned, first of all, that Bartimaeus saw him as the Messiah because he calls him Son of David. He saw that Bartimaeus has great faith because he will later say, your faith has healed you. Your trust and belief in me has healed you. Bartimaeus, as he talks, he's saying, I believe you can do something about this. I believe you have the power to heal me. Jesus, you can do this. And Jesus, just by listening, learns a lot about this man. We learn a lot about people when we just listen to them. So often we just want to go in and fix it. And we think we already have in our preconceived ideas what it's going to take. When in reality, if we would just listen to people, we can learn so much more. Michael Frost, who's an author and a church leader and has spent his career helping people discover their mission, live life on mission, tells a story about a missionary group who went into a poor, remote village in India. And when they went there, they showed up with all sorts of ideas for programs and things that they could do. They were well funded. They had many resources. And they went into this community and they said, we can do whatever you would like for us to do here. We can build a medical clinic here. And we can provide great medical care and provide something that is needed in this community and help people immensely. We could do a school and help people with their education, help them get jobs and find their way out of poverty. We could help them by building a church here. And we could let the church leverage this influence in the community, do all these things. What would you like for us to do? You know what their response was? The response was, we need a mailbox. And the group was like, you don't understand. We have a lot of resources. And we've got a lot of people ready to help with this need. And they said, no, what we really need is a mailbox. And they were so confused by this. They felt like they didn't understand. But then the more they listened, what they discovered is in this community of even if you're a community of 10 to 20,000 people, if you don't have a zip code, if you don't have an address, you're not recognized and you're not existing for anything, including social services from the government or whatever. What they needed first was not a medical clinic or a school or a church. They wanted to be put on the map. They wanted an identity. They wanted to be recognized as a part of their country. They needed that even to do some of the things that they wanted to accomplish. They needed a mailbox. And what they found out is it took them 2 years of bureaucracy and red tape and everything else to get them registered. But once they did, now the doors were open to do some of the bigger things that they wanted to do. But they needed to listen. And Michael Frost talks about the power of listening. Maybe you're familiar with one of these. You know what this is, right? If you watched Miss Colorado give her monologue, you would now know it's not just a doctor's stethoscope, is it? You nurses are, learning about that, a stethoscope. You know, the guy that actually invented this stethoscope, I wrote down what he was noted for saying after its invention, obviously to listen to the heart and to the lungs and to the internal organs. But the one who invented this, here's what he said. He says, if you use this tool, here's what he said, if you use this tool, don't stop listening to your patients. They're telling you how to heal them. In other words, he didn't want doctors just listening to what was going on the inside. He wanted them also to listen to their patients as well. Don't substitute a good listening ear for this device. How many times have we done that in our lives where we're not really listening? We're not hearing people, and yet if we would, what a powerful principle. If we would listen in our workplaces and listen in our families and listen in our communities, it is a powerful tool for not just building relationship, but finding our way into the hearts of people. Dr. John Gottman, who's a leading researcher, and he's one of these a researcher on why marriages succeed. That's what he was studying, why marriages succeed. One of the things that he discovered is that in unhealthy or unhappily married couples, they think they know what their spouse is most looking forward to or most excited about, what they're most concerned or worried about. They think they know when in fact they don't. In happily married and in healthy relationships, what he found is they don't have some intuitive sixth sense of what their partner needs. Instead, they listen. They're good listeners. They really pay attention by listening, and they pick up on those cues. It is when we listen that it opens the door to better relationships, opens the door to people's hearts. It lets people come close and draw near when we listen. So we need to stop, like Jesus did, to listen to people. Stop to listen to people. But we also need to start to listen for needs. So stop to listen to people. And then we need to start to listen for needs. And what I thought was so fascinating in this text is that when Jesus has Bartimaeus approach him, he asks him for what he needs. What do you want from me? What do you need? And he listened to his hurts, he listened to his needs. And when we listen to people's needs and to the wounds and the hurts that are going on in their lives, that gives us an open door to their hearts. We need to listen carefully to what they really need. I remember when Randy Garris, who was my preacher growing up there in Joplin, Missouri, he talked about it this way. He said, we need to listen to the chirps in people's lives. He said, all of us have a smoke alarm in our house, and typically when the batteries are getting low, it'll begin to chirp. It'll begin to beep, but it gives off the warning that their attention is needed here. There is something wrong here that needs attention. And so it begins to chirp and give off those chirps so that you know that there's something that needs to be addressed. And what he was saying was people do the same thing. People give off chirps whenever there are needs that need attention in their lives. Listen for the chirps. A chirp might be where they say, man, things are really tight right now. Or they may say something like, man, I feel like we're just hanging on by a thread. Or they may say, I never see my husband. They may say, it's really been stressful lately. And when you hear the chirps, that's when you engage the situation. Some of the best opportunities we have to share Jesus with people is when there is a hurt or a need and they're giving out a signal, and we listen for that chirp and we respond. You can listen for chirps on Facebook. And look for chirps in the posts. Look for it in Twitter feeds. Look for it in emails. You can listen for chirps in news articles or in reports to find out what's happening in our community that needs attention. You can listen for chirps in conversations when you're talking to people. And here's what I want you to know. When you hear a chirp, you need to ask the next question. When you hear a chirp, you need to ask the next question. Do not let it go by, because when you do, you have missed your opportunity. When you listen for a chirp, ask the next question. So when someone says, man, things are tight, say, how tight are they? What are some of the hard choices you feel like you're having to make right now? When they say, man, things have been stressful lately, ask, what have some of the stressors been? When people share a need or a struggle, that's when you engage. Andy Stanley, who's an author and preacher from Atlanta, he was talking about a core value of their church is that they want to be a church that unchurched people love to attend. That's what they want to be. That's a core value for them. We want to be a church that unchurched people love to attend. And so one of the things that they're trying to do is get their people to invite people to church. And so one of the things he taught his church, he says, there are at least 3 cues you need to be listening to. 3 cues that when you hear this, that is an automatic, you need to invite them to your church. Invite them to your church. I was reading a statistic this week that said, it was put out by Lifeway Research, that said 82% of people, of unchurched people have said, 82% of them have said that if they had a friend or an acquaintance invite them to church, they would go. 82% said if a friend invited me to church, I would go. And so Andy Stanley there at North Point, they were trying to find a way, how could we help our people listen for some cues so they can invite people to church? He said, here's 3 of them, 3 knots. If you hear these 3 knots, that's a cue, invite somebody to church. The first one was this, it's not going well. It's not going. If something's not going well in their life, whatever it is, that's a chirp in which you need to say, you know what? You should come to church with me. There's nothing like when things aren't going well, getting to hear from God, getting people, a community to pray for you, surround you, help you. If you hear someone say, I'm not prepared for, I was not prepared for this. I was not expecting this. We were not ready for this. I was not prepared for this. That is a cue. Invite them to your church and tell them, if you weren't prepared, man, you need to come to church with me. When you feel overwhelmed, the rug's been yanked out from under you, you're not sure, man, that's a great place to be. Where people can come alongside you and pray for you, and you can even have a chance to hear from the Lord. If someone says, I'm not from here, in other words, we're new here, or I'm not from here, or I don't know how this works right here, I don't know very many people around here, man, that is a cue right there. Invite them to your church. There is nothing like going to church where you can meet so many new people from the community right here, people who can help bring you in and make you feel at home. Those are 3 nots. So when you hear people say, it's not going well, or I'm not prepared for, or I'm not from here, that's an automatic cue for you that says invite them to church. Listen to them and engage it. One of the things that I was reflecting on over the last couple weeks when I was thinking about this point of listen, to listen, is one of the things I've learned about really good listeners is great listeners ask great questions. Really good listeners ask really good questions. And one of the ways that you can really demonstrate that you are listening is by asking some good questions. And I want to give one simple example. And I'm going to let my friend, and for many of you know him, Paul Highfield, who just got back from Kenya here several weeks ago. When he came back, he told us a story. And in the story, I just picked up on the fact that Paul was being a great listener, and he engaged that story in a really powerful way. I'll make a few points about that when he's done, but he's going to share that story for you right now on the screen in this video. So just give your attention to the screen.
When we went to Kenya this time, we had an opportunity to go to a place called Transmara. It's across the Mara. And when we were there, we were visiting a guy named Samuel. And his father was there, but he's not a Christian. And we had several hours just to sit and talk. And it was amazing because one of the things that he said is that when he was young, he heard a voice told him that he should not go to church, but he should let his family go to church and his children go to church, but that he should not go to church. And I had an opportunity to share with him about Jesus, how Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life, and the importance of the church. And at one point, I asked him, I said, I want to know more about this voice that you heard. And finally, he told me that it was one of his friends, when he was a warrior, told him not to go to church, but just send his family. And finally, I just said to him, I said, I think you've been listening to the wrong voice all of these years. And as we talked and discussed this, finally he said, I think you're speaking the truth to me, and I think it's time that I listen to a new voice.
What I loved about that story is how Paul, just as they talked, he was just listening to his story. And when he said, a voice told me not to go to church and to send my kids in that community, that stuck in Paul's head. I mean, he couldn't let that go. And so later in the conversation, he just brought it back and he asked a great question. Tell me some more about that voice. Who was that voice? Tell me about that voice. And the more he talked about that voice, it gave Paul that opportunity to say, you've been listening to the wrong voice. And eventually that conversation say, that voice lied to you. That voice lied to you. It was not the truth. When we listen to people, when we become good listeners, we will ask good questions. And when we listen to people, it opens doors and it opens hearts and it opens minds and it gives us opportunity to speak truth into their life. Because one of the things that I see over and over again throughout Scripture is man has not always been a good listener, but our God is. He is a great listener. And He hears us when we call to Him. He hears us when we cry out to Him. Even when Jesus was on the cross, He cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Quoting the Psalms, quoting Scripture, in which that Psalms goes on to say that He would not be abandoned. He would not be abandoned to the grave. That the Father's ear was attentive to His call in hearing Him. Bartimaeus calls out to Jesus, and Jesus stops in His tracks and He listens to him. The Jesus mission is to reach and restore and reproduce. And when we listen to people, not to be heard first, not to speak first, not to tell them first, not to tell them the way it is first, not to tell them why they're wrong first, but to listen, doors will be open to share the gospel with them. When Jesus cried out to His Father from the cross, he was in need. He was in his final moments. And he cried out to the Father, the same Father that he cried out to and prayed to time and time again, the same Father that to begin his ministry he prayed to, the same Father he went off to lonely places to pray to, the same Father that he would go off by himself, getting up early in the morning, even after staying up late into the night to talk to his Father, because he knew his Father listened to him. But you know, maybe more important than talking so God will listen to us is when we listen to him. Jesus said, my sheep listen to my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. You know, we're going to go into a time of communion together, and as we do this morning, where we take bread representing the body broken for us and a cup representing the blood shed for us, we just want you to know if you're not a baptized believer in Christ and you're here today, we're glad you're here, and it is okay just to let those trays pass. You do not need to feel obligated to do that today, but we do this today because in this moment, we are reminded of an incredible sacrifice that was made for our sins. We are reminded of the one that we have committed our lives to, the one that we listen to, the one we want to share with others. So I'm going to ask that you just go ahead and stand at this time. We're going to sing together this morning to prepare our hearts. And as we do, let's cry out to a God who listens.